Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening this morning, whether you are listening on one of our 400 affiliates on our YouTube channel. Just type in Hugh Hewitt at YouTube or at hughhewitt.com. Thank you. The latest. Around the world, there are 1,282,000 cases of the coronavirus. 70,000 people have died. In the United States, there are 337,000 cases, according to the Washington Post this morning. 9,633 people have died. The very good news this morning comes from the IHME, which has revised its estimate significantly downward, according to Dr. Christopher Murray, the director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. They believe, in fact, that the death toll will now come in between 49,431 and 136,401. They also believe that the number of beds and ICU beds and ventilators are all down sharply, but that's in the United States. What about the world? Well, in Europe, the world is preparing to reopen. According to the Financial Times this morning, countries including France and Spain are planning to exit their strategies. But what about shattered states? And that's where I wish to begin this morning, because not a lot of people are paying attention. Not a lot of people are recognizing that this is a catastrophic event in a lot of places around the world that they would never have thought of. Sudarsan Raghavan is our guest. He is the Cairo bureau chief for the Washington Post. And Sudarsan joins me. I guess it's an afternoon in Egypt right now, Sudarsan?
Just became the afternoon. It's a little after 12 here.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. I have been reading your work in the Post. You and your colleagues are doing a great job giving us a panorama of the world. You are particularly dialed in on two failed states, Yemen and Libya. Can you I'll give you the floor and give us a sense of what's going on in those two countries.
Well, thanks for having me. So in Yemen, what we're seeing now is the fighting. There is an intensification of fighting going on there, despite calls by the international community, the United Nations, and other nations for a ceasefire. In fact, just last night, one of the warring parties, the rebel group known as the Houthis, shelled a prison in the town of Tez, killing 5 female prisoners and injuring a number of others. So despite these calls for an end to the fighting, in fact, it's ongoing and civilians are being killed. In Libya, it's even more intense. Both the warring sides there have escalated their fighting over the past few days. There's now routine shelling on residential areas in the capital Tripoli. There's also fighting as far away as the city of Sirte and along the Tunisian and Libyan border. So, and even here as well, the UN, the international community, has basically urged both the warring sides, and these are the Tripoli government, which is the UN-installed government there, and the other side is an Eastern General Commander known as Khalifa Haftar, who launched an offensive a year ago on the capital, and it's been ongoing ever since. But both sides have basically refused to heed calls for a ceasefire in order to deal with the pandemic. And they're basically, trying to gain territory.
Now, our ally, the United Arab Emirates, I thought had withdrawn most of their troops from Yemen. Do they still have a presence there?
There are definitely reports that they're still there. They're not as engaged as they were, let's say, last year. But there's definitely a presence on the ground, certainly according to my sources.
So, what is the medical system in both countries like in the best of times?
One word: shattered. In Yemen, Yemen long before the coronavirus pandemic. Yemen is considered the worst, the most severe humanitarian crisis in the world, according to the UN. The war there, the 5-year-old war there, has they've plenty of medical facilities, clinics have all been targeted largely by airstrikes from the Saudi-led coalition, of which the UAE is a part of. Today, you have half of all medical facilities are closed. Access to clean water is scarce. There are 3.6 million people displaced, living in really in dire, overcrowded camps and also urban neighborhoods, making them all pretty much perfect incubators for the virus. In Libya too, the health infrastructure is damaged, and you've got there've been more than 60 attacks on hospitals and ambulances and medical personnel have been killed or injured in the past year. So even dealing with just routine illnesses is a huge challenge in both countries.
I'm talking with Sudarsan Raghavan, who is a Washington Post Cairo bureau chief, bringing us up to speed on Yemen and Libya. I have been using a metric, Sudarsan, which is Ecuador. No one knows that in Ecuador this virus is ravaging the country. Bodies are piling up in a provincial capital. They're using cardboard coffins. It's sort of one of those places off the map that is a control group for where you don't do anything. And I would guess in Yemen and Libya, the idea of how many ventilators we have is not really a question on the table, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd be very surprised if there were, there were 100 ventilators in either country in total, and both these countries obviously have millions of people. So yeah, I mean, ventilators are a major problem. Right now, what we're seeing is, both these countries are sort of at the beginning of the viral curve. I mean, you have 18 cases now in Libya, and Yemen, I believe, had only its first case just a day ago. But there's still immense concern because so many people in both these countries are living in cramped conditions. Libya in particular. I mean, there are detention centers now filled with thousands of mostly African migrants who are looking at Libya as a way to reach Europe to seek a better life. And now they've tried to cross the Mediterranean. They were caught and sent back and put in these detention centers, and now they're facing a whole new threat, the possibility of the coronavirus spreading through these facilities. So despite the fact that numbers are low now, there is a great concern amongst humanitarians, amongst medical community, that if nothing is done, if the wars continue in both these countries, the numbers could easily spike.
Sudarsan, tell me a little bit about I know you're not reporting on Cairo, but you're the bureau chief of Cairo. What is Cairo like to live in right now?
Well, I mean, I do cover Egypt as well as part of my beat, so I've been writing about the coronavirus from here as well. Today in Cairo, I mean, what we're seeing now is there is a curfew from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., so you can't leave the house. But during the day, life is pretty much normal. I mean, you go around the streets, people are taking buses, metros. They're not socially distancing themselves. It is actually a growing concern amongst a lot of Egyptians, friends of mine, as well as the observers here. But certainly, the government, what it's been doing is, they have been, they are bringing. They're doing the best they can. I mean, they themselves are dealing with a situation where medical and hospital facilities are. I mean, they're functional. They're probably better than most countries in the region, but they're still not up to the standards of, say, Western facilities. Many of them, especially the public hospitals, where ventilation systems don't work properly, there's in terms of cleanliness and disinfection, it's always been a problem long before the crisis. So there's definitely a concern amongst Egyptians that the numbers could rise. I mean, again in Egypt, we're at the beginning of the trend. Right now, there's about a little over 1,100 cases tested positive, 78 deaths, I believe, as of yesterday. This is a country of 100 million people, so people are still remaining extremely concerned that the numbers are probably much greater than what's being reported.
Sudarsan, I appreciate your taking the time. I think America, the IMHE numbers are very, very good, not just for our country, but so that we can turn ourselves into not the arsenal of democracy, but the medicine cabinet for the world, for places like Egypt, Libya, and Yemen. I hope you will continue to come back. Sudarsan Raghavan is with the Washington Post. He is the Cairo bureau chief, and I appreciate his spending time with us very much this morning. Thank you, Sudarsan. Be well. Be safe. I must tell you again as we go to break, I'm going to play the Queen's speech when we come back because she gave one in 1940 to a world racked with war, and she gave one in 2020 to a world racked with illness. And I think you should hear it. But the IHME, again, the good news, we're not going to need as many hospital beds. We're still in a crisis. We're going to have 2 horrible weeks, but boy, that's a good bit of news this morning. I've tweeted it out. If you go to Hugh Hewitt on Twitter, or of course, follow me on YouTube, just type in Hugh Hewitt and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. In 1940, Elizabeth addressed the British nation for the first time. She did so again yesterday as Queen Elizabeth. 80 years after the fact, here she is.
I'm speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time. A time of disruption in the life of our country. A disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. I want to thank everyone on the NHS frontline, as well as care workers and those carrying out essential roles, who selflessly continue their day-to-day duties outside the home in support of us all. I'm sure the nation will join me in assuring you that what you do is appreciated, and every hour of your hard work brings us closer to a return to more normal times. I also want to thank those of you who are staying at home, thereby helping to protect the vulnerable and sparing many families the pain already felt by those who have lost loved ones. Together we are tackling this disease, and I want to reassure you that if we remain united and resolute, then we will overcome it. I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge. And those who come after us will say the Britons of this generation were as strong as any, that the attributes of self-discipline, of quiet, good-humoured resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterize this country. The pride in who we are is not a part of our past. It defines our present and our future. The moments when the United Kingdom has come together to applaud its care and essential workers will be remembered as an expression of our national spirit, and its symbol will be the rainbows drawn by children. Across the Commonwealth and around the world, we have seen heartwarming stories of people coming together to help others, be it through delivering food parcels and medicines, checking on neighbours, or converting businesses to help the relief effort. And though self-isolating may at times be hard, many people of all faiths and of none are discovering that it presents an opportunity to slow down, pause and reflect in prayer or meditation. It reminds me of the very first broadcast I made in 1940, helped by my sister. We as children spoke from here at Windsor to children who had been evacuated from their homes and sent away for their own safety. Today, once again, many will feel a painful sense of separation from their loved ones. But now as then, we know deep down that it is the right thing to do. While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavour, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to everyone. We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. But for now, I send my thanks and warmest good wishes to you all.
We will meet again was a watchword of World War II. That is Elizabeth II. By the way, the world thinks there is good news. The markets are happy this morning. Brought to you by Birch Gold. I think it's still a wonderful time to diversify, and you can do so by sending my name, Hugh, to 474747 or going to hughgold.com. That's hughgold.com, or call 800-434-GOLD, 800-434-GOLD. But again, the text is Hugh, my name, Hugh, to 474747. Everywhere across the globe where it's open, Japan, Hong Kong, England, Germany, the world is rallying on the prospects that indeed the corner has been turned. Gold is at 1663 this morning. Still a good time to enter. Send my name, Hugh, Hugh, to 474747, and come right back. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Mike Allen of Axios AM, where indeed the Axios this morning brings news of what CEOs are telling the president. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Hugh. And amazingly, today should be the March Madness finale. Tonight we should be watching, if you stay up late enough, it'll probably be the early morning, one shining moment.
Unfortunately, for many, many thousands of athletes, like graduates, like Olympians, denied for a time certain or forever their moment in the sun. Mike, I just saw that in Axios AM, you did point number 9, the sun, we will meet again. I just played the Queen's speech. I thought it was magnificent and inspiring. I don't know if you got to hear it, but it really is something to have had her address the country in 1940 and again in 2020.
Well, yeah, Hugh, I could be wrong about this, but never thought of this until I watched it. I watched all 4 minutes and 8 seconds of it, and I'm not sure I had heard her voice in a decade.
Oh, you might be right. It's been a bit.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. But she was wonderful. Let me talk to you before we go to the executives that lead Axios AM this morning. From IHME this morning, the biggest news of the morning. It came out after Axios AM. COVID estimates from IHME are dropping dramatically as they estimate they're not going to need as many ventilators, hospital beds, ICUs, and the death toll may be as low as 81,000. Indeed, it might get down to below 50,000. This is very cheering news on a Monday morning, Mike Allen.
It sure is, and there were rays of hope. The front page of today's New York Post, drop in daily New York death toll could signal curve peak, P-E-A-K. So New York on track for its peak around Thursday, projected by the same University of Washington researchers. National peak April 15th, which I believe is a week from Wednesday.
Now, I'd like you to unpack the first story because in the Financial Times this morning, that's the first newspaper I read, Europe prepares to ease coronavirus lockdown. It's a story of governments in Spain, Belgium, Finland, and France are among the many countries that have set up expert committees to examine a gradual easing of stay-at-home orders. What are the executives telling you and Jim Vandehei about what the United States has to do?
Yeah, Hugh, they want to do something similar. So our headline is, what top CEOs fear telling America, and that is that they want to have a hard conversation about how we reopen business. Because, Hugh, behind the scenes, what business leaders are telling us is that June could be too late for many businesses. Many businesses will go under never to come back. And and this is big and small companies. So they want to start, and I think we'll hear it in the next couple of weeks, probably from business groups rather than a particular company or a particular person going out on a whim, as my grandma would say, by themselves. And they want to have a conversation about the trade-offs that are involved in these widespread lockdowns going beyond the middle of next month. And they know that they have to be very careful about it. But what one top executive of a global company told us, Hugh, is if this goes on too long, the fear builds more and more. We need to lay the groundwork for the fear to ebb.
You know, I think they're right. I am reminded of a funny story, Mike. It wasn't funny, it was dramatic, but it's an odd thing to recall. Do you remember the purple thumbs of the Iraqi voters when they first voted? They dipped their...
One of the most inspiring photos you'll ever see, especially the women.
Yeah, and so if we find a way to tag people who have got the antibody, and the Mayo Clinic and another company in North Carolina, Research Triangle, have both come up with antibody tests, if they can scale and mark as safe, because it's a 99.97%, you will not get it a second time if you've had it, those people will be the backbone of the recovery. Any word from these executives on whether they're thinking in terms of workforces that are immune or made immune by fact that they've had it?
Sure, and I know that you're talking theoretically there. Exactly what you're saying is very hard to envision in America, right? But what they are saying is, and this is how the administration looks at it too, the administration has always told me behind the scenes, we're going to roll back the guideline, metro area by metro area, and remember, they think that the virus probably comes in waves. So Seattle's wave has passed, for sure. but it could be back in the fall. So as the wave either passes, or the few places in America that have been passed over by the virus, some rural areas, could you start having people go back? And this could be by geography, so probably metro areas as opposed to whole states. But you could do it by demography, that is, though people who are not the most at risk. And it could be types of jobs, exactly what sorts of skill are required. And likely, this would come with guidelines about wearing masks and gloves in some of these tasks.
Now, I also want to go to Axios AM point number 6, data du jour. I have been studying GDP as a percentage of expenditure, and in World War II, I thought that our high point was 27% of GDP as an expenditure in 1943. You've got 1944 at 41%. The pandemic, we're not even close to this yet. I don't know where Hamilton Place Strategies comes to 35% unless they are counting the Fed's intervention. But in terms of sheer deficit, $4 trillion is not 35% of a $20 trillion economy. Your point being, though, generally, and I agree with it, we are going to see a deficit that rivals World War II, and that's not a bad thing, correct?
Well, these figures come from Matt McDonald at Hamilton Place Strategies, and the point that he makes is that we need to start thinking even bigger when we try to conceive what this rescue package and all of federal spending this year looks like. It's usually wrapped up with TARP. It's usually wrapped up with the 2009 financial crisis package. But whatever figure you want to agree on, you agree that it's closer to World War II. Why does this matter? The point that Mac McDonald at Hamilton Place Strategies, based here, and your Washington mavens will know that Hamilton Place is a reference to that little street that runs between the Treasury Department and the White House. In the time that you and I have been in Washington, it used to be open. It used to be a park. There were benches. People used to sit there and have lunches. Of course, now it's closed off since 9/11. But Hamilton Place Strategies, which specializes in business banks, treasury, says this matters because it's a reminder that the pandemic is going to result in big societal changes, policy changes, political changes. And just to help us think as big as we should think, Matt McDonald reminds us that after World War II, that's when we got the Defense Department.
You know, I'm thinking about rereading David Brinkley's classic Washington Goes to War because of the changes wrought in Washington during that. I did do a walkabout, socially distanced, appropriate, with senior government official yesterday through the monument and empty early morning of Washington, D.C., and I must say it's very, very strange, but I do know that people haven't stopped working. They're working overtime. Last quick scoop by Jonathan Swan from Axios AM, a moment of anger from Peter Navarro in the Situation Room directed at Tony Fauci. Not a good story, not a good look for anyone. I can't imagine anyone yelling at Tony Fauci.
Oh, this is so delicious. When Swan told me what he was working on, I sent him back the little emoji of a box of popcorn. So this is inside the epic White House fight over hydroxychloroquine, the supposed virus cure, and this is amazing. You rarely get word for word inside the West Wing like this. Swan has it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, of course, and what he tells us about is that Peter Navarro was talking about this drug, and he said that from the studies he'd seen that it had a clear therapeutic efficacy. Well, that set off an exchange. Fauci pushed back against Navarro, and Fauci and others, that just set Peter off. And a great quote, Navarro said to Fauci, "That's science, not anecdote." And Navarro started raising his voice and at one point accused Fauci of objecting to the president's travel restrictions from China, which, of course, he's very proud of.
That was a side swipe. I know both Peter and I've interviewed Fauci. On the science, I'll go with Fauci, but I know that Peter wants to bring in massive amounts in the event of efficacy. So I checked with my retired toxicologist last night, had him read the Swan report, and he said, Fauci is right. It's not what we call a double-blind study, and Navarro is right. I would take it if I was sick. So I like that result. Mike Allen, good to talk to you. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Allen. Read Axios AM every morning. Thank you, Mike. Let me remind you, I got cut short on my market report, so I've got to tell you, in Japan, where the market is now closed, it went up 4.25% overnight. Hong Kong up 2%. Markets are still open in England and Germany, and they have surged. And I expect today will be a very good day on the American market. Again, the story of the morning, and this is brought to you by Birch Gold Group. And again, you can go to hughgold.com. You can call them at 1-800-434-GOLD, or you can text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747 and diversify. They can help you, for example, take part of your 401k. Maybe you had a bond fund that's done well, as most bond funds have done during this period of time, and you can diversify that into a precious metals, physical precious metals backed IRA or 401k. I think the markets will continue to rally, provided the models continue to show, as they said last night, light at the end of the tunnel. The updated COVID-19 estimates find that the need for hospital beds, ICU beds, and ventilators to deal with COVID are less than previously estimated, as is the death total in the United States. That is very, very good news. The president yesterday spoke to this idea that we will endure, we will overcome, cut number 13.
Be apart. We can use this time to turn to reflection and prayer and our own personal relationship with God. I would ask that all Americans pray for the heroic doctors and nurses, for the truck drivers and grocery store workers, and for everyone fighting this battle. I had mentioned yesterday where I see the nurses rushing into hospitals, and they're putting on their outfits and they're putting on their masks and goggles in some cases. They're rushing into war. And I see people from apartment houses screaming and shouting and singing their praises. It's an incredible thing. They're warriors. These doctors and nurses, they're running into buildings and they're literally putting it on.
The president is absolutely correct, and applaud them. Time to tell you about Relief Factor. You can call 800-500-8384 right now to order relieffactor.com, 800-500-8384. You can also hit option 5 if you want to tell them how it's working for you. It's working for me great. I did 10 miles on Saturday, first 10 miler I've done in 2 months. And that's because it's just, what else am I going to do every day except walk and run and trundle? All right, take my 4 pills. In the first hour, I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. That's the Relief Factor combination of natural supplements that I take. There's the bag, North Carolina blue, bordered in lime green, beautiful design, easy to take, necessary supplements. Look, tens of thousands of you take it every single morning. Many of you, like me, swear by it. It is not a cure-all, but it does support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come, and you should be out there walking in a socially distant approach. You've got to keep your heart rate up at least 30 to 20 minutes a day, longer if you can. Time to add those miles in. Janet Lisa Mo told me he's doing his bicycle more than he's ever done. ReliefFactor.com and HonorBoundCoffee.com, so that every dollar of profit from the coffee you drink goes to support military families. I'll be right back with Salena Zito. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Monday morning. The good news is the IMHE model suggests a precipitous drop in the need for hospital beds, ICU units, ventilators, and perhaps in the death rate in the United States. Germany reports that it's got its fourth straight daily drop in new coronavirus infections. I'm joined by Salena Zito from Yinzer Country. Salena, good morning. Your column on the layoff of workers locally from hospitals was surprising, but I guess upon reflection, if you cut down all elective surgery and you focus exclusively, you're going to find some workers are superfluous.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about this. Hospitals, they make their bread and butter from those from elective surgeries, from the knee surgery or the athletic surgery, and that's not just a doctor. That's several nurses. That's a therapist. That's a physical therapist. That's an anesthesiologist. That's several technicians. You get the MRI. Then you have the follow-up. All those people are not doing anything. The emergency rooms are literally empty. They're 70 to 80% down. Why? Because people aren't doing anything. They're not in cars. They're not out, running around playing sports. They're not doing the things that cause them to that makes them end up being in an emergency room.
Yeah, they're not on the scooters that get hit because they're out of the crosswalk, or they're not on the bike paths where they get run over. They're not crossing against the light. They're not doing dumb things because they're not out, and therefore the ERs are empty. But I'm still sort of surprised that the hospital system in your neck of the woods, that's a very Ohio term, laid people off.
Yeah, and the Washington health system isn't alone. There are several places across the country there's a lot of new hospitals across the country that are doing that. They're just not saying it out loud because, you sort of put that imagery next to the imagery of New York, and all of a sudden people are going to just go crazy because they're not going to understand why this is happening.
Well, there is a story in the Financial Times this morning that European countries are considering the slow reopen. And if the IMHE numbers continue down, I think the pressure will grow for a May 1 start rather than a June 1 start. Do you not agree with that?
I think that's highly possible. I don't know if I disagree with that. I mean, if all the facts bear out, if all the trends bear out, it certainly makes sense.
Yeah, I want to be guided by data. I know there are a couple of pandemic deniers who I follow, and I don't want to call them deniers. They're pandemic skeptics. They think we've overreacted. I follow them in order to check my own concern about the virus, but I do believe a premature unloosening of the lid will allow it to creep back out. They did that in 1918 to 1919. It was with disastrous effects. Are any of these hospital workers bitter? Do they want to go back to work? I mean, they can't want rotator cuff surgeries to come roaring back yet, do they?
No, and no one is. Yeah, I did not get that sense at all. People understood, that this is temporary. That it's going, as soon as this is over, it's coming back, and they're also prepared in case it hits here in a bad way. I believe that the president has said that this week was going to be the worst week, this upcoming week that we just started. So they're prepared to come right back to work if it hits here in the way that it has hit in other more large, more highly concentrated areas.
So, Salena, what is the beacon hospital? Like the Cleveland Clinic is the standard of care in northeastern Ohio and indeed around the world for cardiac care. But what is its equivalent in Pittsburgh? I mean, have you got electricity there?
UPMC.
It's the what?
UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center.
Have you been able to venture down there yet to see what it's like?
It's a ghost town.
Really?
They're all ghost towns. The hospitals are just, nobody's going into the emergency rooms. No one's going in. People People are literally behaving. They're doing what people are, at least here, they're doing what they're being told to do. And if you don't have to go into the emergency, they haven't been going out, so they haven't,
Yeah, they're not falling off ladders. The last time I put a nail through or slammed a door on my hand and I went into the ER, it was empty. And that's what I imagine right now. The children are still going to smash their doors in the hands, but they're going to get seen really quickly. I'm just curious if they've established a separate entrance for people suspicious of COVID versus the run-of-the-mill broken arm. I mean, kids are still going to break their arm, right?
Kids are really going to break their arms, but the parents are, for the most part, behaving. The kids are inside. It is a ghost town here.
That is remarkable. Salena Zito will continue to look for your pieces in the New York Post, Washington Examiner. Follow her on Twitter at Salena Zito. Follow me to the next hour. In the meantime, go visit YouTube and sign up for my YouTube channel. You'll be able to listen to every minute of the show, even if you're out and about. YouTube, just type in Hugh space Hewitt. And on Twitter at Hugh Hewitt and Facebook, Instagram, etc. I'll be right back. Hour number 2 of this Monday show coming right at you. Welcome back, America. Morning glory, bonjour, hi. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the first day of what is going to be the worst couple of weeks America has seen since 9/11, according to the president. But not all is grim. As I told you at the beginning of last hour, the new IHME COVID-19 forecast find lower need for hospital beds, lower need for ICU units, lower need for ventilators, a lower projected death total. That's all good news. Europe's starting to reopen, but in the meantime, small businesses are struggling to stay alive in the middle of this. JobCreatorsNetwork.com is banding them together. I urge you to join it, but I thought I would talk with one small business I know very well. BestHotGrill.com is, of course, a sponsor of the show. This is not a sponsored segment, though. I just reached out to Rett Rasmussen, who is the CEO of BestHotGrills.com, and asked him to join me. Good morning, Rett. How are you?
Hi, morning glory, Hugh. Doing wonderful. Thank you.
You are up early, but you're always up early these days. And my greetings to your general counsel and to everybody at BestHotGrill.com. First of all, what did you do when the lockdown orders came, and how have you evolved the business since then? And you might want to start by telling people what you were doing in February and January in order to contrast March and April with that.
Well, Hugh, it was business as normal in January and February, right on line with the tremendous economy that we all have been enjoying up to this point. But it really started going downhill in mid-March, as we all know, and I was out of town at a trade show, calling back to Irene, my wife, business partner, general counsel, and talking with her, and decided, okay, on March 12th, that we're not going to work overtime the next day on Friday, which we normally work 4 9s and a 4, and if we need overtime, we work longer on Fridays. So I cut that off. Then when got back that weekend, we started, pulling in the reins. Decided that okay, we're not going to work next Friday. Then we actually went to about an hour and a half before the state of California announced their lockdown. I was already telling my staff that we're going to reduce hours the next week until further notice, down to 30 hours, but still keeping it full time so we could pay their benefits. And that same day, on the 23rd of March, I told all my net 30-day customers that until further notice, I would only ship product out with a credit card so that we could maintain cash flow and not increase accounts receivable that we may or may not get paid for. It just didn't seem good to keep our employees employed without any cash coming in. So I've been very much in a conservative preservation of cash mode here from the start of this thing.
You're very online, besthotgrill.com. In fact, I think the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is ordering one this week for our son who just moved into their house, because if you can't go out, you can at least grill in the backyard, and besthotgrill.com is the place to do it. Has your online business sunk, stayed the same, or gone north?
It's been going, everything's down about a third from where we were prior to this happening in the last couple of weeks. But it's the positioning that we've done over the last course, probably 5, 6, 7 years that have we've become more direct to consumer, direct to dealer. We don't have two-step distribution except in a couple of legacy cases around the country. A lot of things have really positioned us well for this downturn. But part of it was first determining that we are an essential business. We are in the supply chain, supplying to plumbers, to service personnel. We're an appliance manufacturer in the heating and comfort and cooking industry with our gas logs and other vent-free heaters that we make. And so that gave us the confidence that we can stay open. And the positioning that we've done over the course of the last few years really brought us to it. Another thing that did it for us was an item that we kind of curse. We're spread out over 4 acres and 9 buildings, and we always kind of would grumble when we had to walk out in the rain when it does happen in SoCal. But now we have a built-in social distancing of spreading our 62 employees across 9 buildings. It's worked well to our advantage.
How have the besthotgrill.com employees reacted to the 6-foot minimum spacing?
They're embracing it because they want to maintain their job. We have been very diligent in informing them, in educating them. In fact, this will be the start of the third week of taking temperatures every morning. I set up a maze of grills that makes a circuitous path in our showroom so that and striped it out with duct tape so that they maintain 6 feet as they come in every morning to have their temperature taken by me and recorded by Irene. It's one of the things that we did to bring comfort because they may know where they have been. They don't know where their coworker has been. And so they've been very thankful for that. They've been thankful that we've been able to maintain their job up to this point.
Now, I love your website. We are open for business. Please enter coupon code STRONG when ordering on our web store. What does that get you, Rett?
It gets our customers a 15% discount. It gets them free shipping. And for those who aren't ready to buy now and understand why you wouldn't be, we also have, if you scroll just a little bit further down, the opportunity for them to contact us for a quote where we will lock in the current prices and that 15% discount and free shipping through December 31st of this year. So when we get that bounce back that we're all hoping for, everybody gets back to work. Those who want to act between now and April 30, we're going to lock that in for them.
So you get a gas log, a Solar grill, or a patio heater over at besthotgrill.com. Now, Rett, you are a Naval Academy graduate, so obviously you're trained in leadership and you know how to respond. Your supply chain above you and below you, though, are not necessarily that well trained. How is the delivery system going, and how is the supply chain below you moving up to you?
Well, as far as our vendors go, most of them are open for business. They're doing well. The trucking companies are just working 24/7 right now. They are really busy. We've not seen too many issues with them, although if they're delivering to a business and they appear that they're not open, they're just immediately sending the merchandise back to us. We've had that happen a couple of times, even though it was more of a misunderstanding, but they're very hypersensitive to businesses closing right away, and they're afraid of clogging up their warehouses with too much merchandise, so they just send it on back.
One of my young friends who's run Secure Space, SECUR Space, they've got demand that they never saw before because people have all of a sudden got inventory that they've got no place to put. Rett, what would you say? There are a lot of senators driving in or listening right now. What do you think they ought to legislate in Phase 4? I don't think you're a big Speaker Pelosi, let's bail out the pension funds for the state employees person, but what would you like to see, if anything, done?
Well, we have taken advantage of the Paycheck Protection Plan program, PPP. We submitted our application last Friday, and I'm going to bring my employees back at 40 hours a week if and when that loan comes through. As far as Phase 4, frankly, where I want to see it go is let's start a rollback, bringing people back to work sooner rather than later, and do it, in a geographical means. Kind of look at the Sweden model, and not bankrupt our economy based on with the cure that may be worse than the disease. That's where my feelings are. It just pains me to see restaurants dark in the dining room. Let's start bringing back people with the social distancing. Whether that money wise in Phase 4, a lot of that is I agree with you. Let's really get the defense industry going back. That has a great multiplier effect in our economy.
And I believe that as soon as we get antibody testing and people can get the purple thumb equivalent of a pass to go back to work, we got to let people go back to work wherever they work. Rett Rasmussen, thank you for giving us an up-close view of what's going on the factory floor. BestHotGrill.com, my friends, for your gas logs, your Solar grill, the best grill made in America. and your patio heaters. Go buy them. They're in business. And find people who are in business and do what you would normally do. Purchase from them and jobcreatorsnetwork.com. If you are a small business, let them know what you think needs to be done because they're collecting stories and recommendations for the Congress as we speak. I'll come right back, America. Check markets overseas. BestHotGrill.com. Go and support a great American business today. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Are you enjoying your ability to watch some things like Hamilton? Are you enjoying Fauda? Ozark? Don't change the subject, but I got a recommendation for you. I am deeply involved in the series Le Bureau, L-E space B-U-R-E-A-O, The Bureau in French. It is about the DGSE. It makes Homeland look like a piker. It's the real deal. And it was recommended to me by an IC professional. They said, do you want to really see what the intelligence community does? Watch Le Bureau. And you've got to put up with subtitles, but I do. Have you watched this yet, Generalissimo? Le Bureau?
No. What?
Le Bureau. Have you watched it yet?
The Bureau? No, I have not watched The Bureau.
Yeah, I would recommend it completely. Le Bureau.
I'm on Picard right now.
Don't know Picard.
Star Trek.
Oh, meh. All right, let me bring you up to speed on another option for you to watch. No Safe Spaces. Dennis Prager, Adam Carolla's wonderful, wonderful film has a 99% audience rating at Rotten Tomatoes. If you go to nosafespaces.com, you can get it for sale 25% off. That's the code, sale 25. But Hollywood doesn't want you to see this movie. You can't watch it on Netflix or Amazon Prime. You just have to go to nosafespaces.com. Please do that. Just as much as I told you, please go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com and join it. I would like you to hear what Anthony Fauci said yesterday about, on Face the Nation, what will happen if this virus is not suppressed completely. Cut number 15.
Well, you bring up a very good point, Margaret. Unless we get this globally under control, there's a very good chance that it will assume a seasonal nature, in the sense that even if we, and I hope it's not just if, but when, we get it down to the point where it really is at a very low level, we need to be prepared that since it unlikely will be completely eradicated from the planet, that as we get into next season, we may see the beginning of a resurgence. And that's the reason why we're pushing so hard in getting our preparedness much better than it was, but importantly, pushing on a vaccine and doing clinical trials for therapeutic interventions so that hopefully, if in fact we do see that resurgence, we will have interventions that we did not have in the beginning of the situation that we're in right now.
Now, the president is neither promoting nor not promoting. He is simply informing about hydroxychloroquine, whatever it is. Cut number 12, the president.
Why not just let the science speak for itself? Why are you promoting this drug?
I'm not. I'm just saying very simply, I'm not at all. I'm not. Look, you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to save lives. You come out here
every day, right, sir, talking about the benefits of
I want them to try it, and it may work and it may not work. But if it doesn't work, it's nothing lost by doing it, nothing. Because we know long-term what I want to save lives. And I don't want it to be in a lab for the next year and a half as people are dying all over the place.
It's already out there. Doctors are already able to prescribe it off-label.
That's right. All I'm doing
so what
is
do you
saying,
accomplish?
Well, I'll tell you what I accomplished. We bought massive amounts of it, 29 million doses of it. We have it coming from all of the labs. We're actually now doing it here because in case it does work, we want to have it. And we've given it to drugstores. We're sending it all over. FEMA's doing it.
Explain what's going on here. Peter Navarro and some of the laymen believe it has shown efficacy in foreign studies. Dr. Fauci does not believe they have a double-blind controlled study to prove efficacy. The president is saying if you are sick and there's nothing else available, by all means give it a whirl. What have you got to lose? And this is not complicated. I do not know why the media is upset with the president being optimistic that maybe it'll work for some people, maybe it won't. There is some downside to using erythromycin if you have heart conditions. He talked about that, but what he's doing is, and I talked to a toxicologist last night, and while he agrees with Fauci that the science does not prove that it's efficacious, he agrees that people ought to have the right to try it. And this is a PhD toxicologist who knows what he's talking about. That, of course you have the right to try it. It might work. That's all this is. I don't know why we're spending a lot of time debating. The president's just broadcasting it out there to doctors using the pulpit that he has. Let's get over this. The media's got to get over this. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on a Monday of good news in the middle of a pandemic of horrible news. The good news is that the IHME COVID-19 forecast has been revised downward. We need fewer hospital beds, fewer IC units, fewer ventilators. The death toll peak has been lowered. However, in Europe, they are talking about opening up. Governments, according to the Financial Times, governments in France, Spain, Belgium, and Finland are among many countries that have set up expert committees to examine a gradual easing of stay-at-home orders. We don't have such a committee in the United States. Yesterday online, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and Fox News' Dana Perino simultaneously suggested it. Great minds thinking alike. I'm joined now by Governor Scott Walker. Good morning, Governor. Where do we find you today?
I am safely at home in Wisconsin. Have been for a month, so I guess I was ahead of the curve.
How is the Walker family generally?
Everybody's good. You know, I spoke at CPAC, so I had a 2-week head start on everybody else because I had to be in self-quarantine after being exposed to one of the participants who tested positive. But my wife is back with me now, and we're all here, and our kids who are in their 20s are at a different location. They live on their own, and they're good as well. And we like everybody else, we FaceTime them a couple times a day. And my mom has been in self-quarantine for a month, so we're doing all right. Hope you're doing well.
Good. That's the Hewitt family to a T. Now, Governor, talk to us a little bit about what you and Dana talked about, and another task force apart from pandemic response that would focus on economic reopening.
Yeah, we got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Obviously, number one priority, health and safety of the American people has to be. In fact, actually, the longer this drags on the health side, the worse off it is for the economy. So first, everybody's got to do their part. Don't go out if you don't have to. Do all the things that CDC tells you to. But we've got to be planning for this transition. We can't just abruptly, if things go well on May 1st, wake up and everybody's back to work. There's got to be a logical transition. It's got to be something we thought out about. It's got to be acted on. And I wrote in the Washington Times about how I think there's a way to do it with what I call extreme caution, meaning you look at certain industries like manufacturing where people can be spread out, where you can close down break rooms and lunch rooms, where you can monitor entrance and exit from the facilities, where you can do a whole series of things. Keep much of the administrative work. Those sorts of industries still can stay at home, but transition back into the economy. You can't do it the flip of a switch. There's got to be a plan, and you got to have a logical way of doing it.
Now, Governor, I set up this conversation by talking in the first segment with Rett Rasmussen, who runs BestHotGrill.com in California, where he has kept manufacturing grills and gas logs and outdoor heaters by spacing his employees. They have 9 buildings over 4 acres, so it's a little bit easier testing their employees as they come in. But and they've managed to keep up about 3/4 of their business online at BestHotGrill.com. I imagine there are a lot of people who are eager to do that, but they are a little bit of they're going to need some encouragement from the government to do that, and some I think liability protection. Would you imagine liability protection for people getting back to work is going to be essential to a phase 4 if one emerges from the Congress?
Yeah, I do. I think we've got to get smart people thinking about all these different things. Part of what prompted my column was talking to one of my neighbors who's in that same boat, and we walked him through just on a personal, not just a policy level, all the things you talked about, bringing cleaning crews in, having a testing monitor, spacing people out, even in the bathroom, putting out signage that kept people from going in more than one at a time in the restrooms. All those sorts of things have got to be thought out. I think the same thing, even more so, is going to be true with retail locations eventually, where maybe there's even signage that people say this facility, this establishment follows these CDC requirements to transition back into employment. Got to do all those things. Liability is a part of it. One other key thing, Hugh, and this is something that Lindsey Graham talked about initially when the big bill passed, but we still got to do it, and that is dealing with unemployment compensation. I'm not saying people shouldn't get resources. Right now, things are crazy. They're wild. We got to get those checks out, get people money, get the economy back going again, get people to be able to pay their rent and their mortgage and their bills. But I think there's got to be a way the federal and the state governments need to work with the private sector and help people ease off of those higher benefits. Because remember, there's a lot of Americans who are going to make more under their unemployment. Not everybody, but many who will make more under unemployment than they make being employed. We've got to help them transition. And my suggestion is you don't have a benefits cliff. You ease people off during the time of this transition so there's an incentive to get back into the workforce.
Now, Governor, I got two specific questions for you because you've got so much experience, and I hope you end up on this task force. The first is many Americans, as you know, work two jobs, and they do so in order to put their kids through college, to pay for a home, to get a little bit of cushion built up in savings. If they get laid off from one, a lot of state employment insurance programs do not allow them to claim unemployment. I think that's wrong. What's the Wisconsin rule, and what's your thinking about this?
Well, I think it will be a barrier, not only in Wisconsin, but in a good chunk of states. I think these circumstances are extraordinary, and that's why I think we've got to come in, and it's got to be the federal and the state working together, because with the number of these changes, liability, unemployment insurance, other reforms, and it's not just unemployment, it's other benefits. We changed, for example, when I was governor, what I call the benefits cliff for people who were working but who found it was a disincentive to work more hours, or even in some cases to take a job in the first place, because if they had kids, their health insurance was covered better up until a certain income level. We allowed it to eliminate the benefits cliff and transition people off of public assistance. The same thing's got to be true here. Any barrier, whether it's multiple jobs, unemployment, loss of income, all those things have got to be, you've got to re-examine everything and find ways to provide incentives to get people back to work, because we open up the door. We put out the "we're open" sign, but if a good chunk of Americans find it's not in their financial interest to come back to work, we're going to have a big problem.
A second area where I see some federal leadership could be useful is in becoming a business interruption insurer of first resort and using America's existing insurance companies with their adjustment and their expertise. But to say, look, show us year over year revenue decline, or even January over April revenue decline, and we'll write you a check, because business interruption insurance, that's actually what we've got here. We've got the sort of event that normally businesses are insured for if it's a hurricane or a fire, but for which they are not insured, a medical emergency. What do you think about business interruption insurance from the federal government through the existing state insurance systems?
Well, I think it makes sense, and here's the reason why. Obviously, I'm not a big spender. I'm someone who's for years have talked about the need for a balanced budget amendment in the federal government. I got real concerns long-term about the size of the debt and feel like we'd be in a much better position if we weren't sitting on a $23.5 almost $1 trillion debt that'll be probably $30 trillion within the year. Having said all that, as a governor, you just alluded to this, as a governor, I saw not hurricanes, but many a tornado and flood and other disaster. And it was right for the state, the federal, and even the local governments to help those individuals, those homeowners, as well as those small businesses get back up on their feet again, particularly if the government came in during an emergency and shut parts of a city or region down. It only made sense that then there was federal assistance, there was state assistance, there was local assistance to cover the time. They were compensated for their loss of business. That's what we're experiencing. It's just not in a designated area. It's all over the country and clearly all over the world. We have to take care of what's happening in the United States, and it makes sense to use every asset we have to get people back to work.
Now, I'm going to talk about a bad idea, but a quick question. Have you spoken with the president, Governor Walker?
I have not. I've talked to Lindsey Graham. I've talked to the vice president. I've talked to others. I figure you can relate to this. I figured I'm not going out of my way to bug them at a time when obviously there's critical things going on. But I have, of late, last week, talked 2 or 3 times to Senator Graham about this, because this is obviously a passion of his, and talk to the vice president's team.
Well, I think a task force is great, and I think you ought to lead it myself. Now, here's the bad idea that's floating around is a lot of state pension funds have taken enormous hits in the market, which have made them appear even more insolvent than they were. Wisconsin has the most solvent pension fund in America. I believe that is the case, and it's still taking a hit. I am not opposed to making some of those losses good, provided there is attached to it a cap on the amount of budget of outlay that any individual, I don't think any retiree from any public employment job should ever make more than a colonel on active duty in the Army for 30 years or their equivalent in the Navy. I just do not believe in $300,000 pensions or $200,000 pensions. I just don't. And I wonder if you think there will be an opportunity in replenishing some of these state pension funds to reform them.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. In fact, before I was governor, the reason I became the Milwaukee County executive, the head of the million-some people in Milwaukee County, first Republican ever, was because of a pension scandal. And we came in precisely because of some of those numbers you talked about. In fact, some cases, they had an open-ended lump sum pension that gave people a payout of somewhere, in some cases, even up to $1 million. That's wrong. That's part of the reason why I came in and cleaned things up. And people, even in a Democrat-leaning county, elected someone like me. I think on pensions, on unemployment, and a whole series of other public programs that are out there, we, in return for the taxpayers, all of us are going to pay for fixing many of these things. We've got to demand that there's reform in place. Good example, Wisconsin. You mentioned our pensions. Not only do we have, since I've been governor, public employees making their portion of the contribution for the retirement, not the taxpayer picking up both. But the other thing we maintain, which other states and regions should look at, is we have a pension, but it's not traditional in the sense that there's a core, which is the base you get no matter what. But then on top of that, the annuitant, the retiree, participates in both the risk and the reward, just like people do with 401ks. That's part of the reason why we're where we're at, number one in the nation. Other systems should look at this so that the taxpayers aren't taking all the risk.
That's why phase 4, if it comes, and I'm so glad Mitch McConnell is going to have a veto over this, and Lindsey's involved in it, and I'd love some governors to be involved in it. There's got to be reform along with it. So how many people would be on a commission that works well? We have 30 seconds, Governor. What's the maximum number of participants to actually get something done?
I think the key is it depends on who those folks are, but I'd look at somewhere 12, 15 range. You could go a little bit higher depending on the quality of the folks. But and it's got to be across the board, public, private, Democrat, Republican. There's got to be a fair representation without being a quota system. But there's got to be a good mix of good-willed, well-intentioned people who just.
Do you need anyone from the media on there? I don't think so.
No, I think if you get small business, a couple different industries, and you get a couple key lawmakers from both chambers and both parties, and a few governors, and I would even say even local officials. Because there's all these different nuances we just talked about, and you don't want to ignore any of them.
I think you're right. Governor Scott Walker, thank you for joining me at Scott Walker on Twitter. Now, if you're out there working it off, relieffactor.com, you don't want to gain weight, you're out there walking in a socially responsible way, I kind of think maybe bicyclists should put away their bikes for the next month, because it's pretty hard to use spaces with bicyclists. I know that's don't hate me, but that's the case. But no matter whether you're walking, running, trundling, jogging, doing pull-ups, if you are doing something you've never done before, you're going to use new muscle groups. That's where the relieffactor.com comes in. And I know that you can also order it by phone now. All right, they've opened that up, 800-500-8384. In fact, if you want to tell them what you think about it, I think it's option 5, but the number is 800-500-8384. I would go to relieffactor.com, get the starter pack, continue to get it, use it, make sure that it is making your life better. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. Come right back, America. The Hugh Hewitt Show continues.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. If you just listened to Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, talk about how to get America back to work again, and you want to send that to your friend, we're going to post it over at my YouTube channel, to which you should be subscribing. We put up there, you can watch the whole show on it, but you can also find later in the day the key interviews that we have conducted. You go to youtube.com, put the search term Hugh Hewitt in, and then hit the subscribe button, and you'll get every bit of audio you need to listen to. Let me again return to, if you're just waking up in the mountain time zone, or you're an early riser in the Pacific time zone, this is a press release from IHME. All right, that is the Institute for Health, and I can't remember what it is. It's the go-to place out west. Seattle. Updated COVID-19 estimates find the need for hospital beds, ICU beds, and ventilators to deal with COVID epidemic are less than previously estimated. Okay, you get that? Less. The revised forecasts reflect, quote, a massive infusion of new data, said Dr. Christopher Murray, director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME, at the University of Washington School of Medicine. New data on COVID-19 health service use from multiple U.S. sources, including New York, Massachusetts, Georgia, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Florida, and California, has led to revisions down in the estimated needs to deal with the pandemic. In addition, the estimation of the likely peak of the epidemic in each state has been strengthened by epidemics peaking after social distancing in 7 more locations internationally. Quote, as we obtain more data and more precise data, the forecasts that we at IHME created have become more accurate, Murray said. And these projections are vital to health planners, policymakers, and anyone else associated with caring for those affected and infected with the coronavirus. IHME is predicting the need for approximately 25,000 ventilators over the next several weeks. We can do that. Estimates of the need for ventilators have been primarily revised downward because of the much larger data sets on U.S. practice patterns for caring for COVID patients. Predicted excess demand for ICU beds has also been revised downward, with an estimated 16,323 bed shortage. There are skeptics about that. Thus far, we do not have one hospital system that has run out of ICU beds. May it be so across the country. Dr. Murray noted that for patients who do not require ICU services, the length of stay has gone down. But for those who need ICU services, the length of stay has increased. Estimated demand for ICU beds and ventilators is also influenced by the longer stay of patients who survive. Lower numbers of required hospital beds may also reflect triage practices and overstretched hospital systems, such as New York, where moderately ill patients cannot be admitted. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe people aren't getting run over because they're not outside. We will find out eventually. But the good news is really here. Regarding death from the virus, the Institute's previous general analysis still stands. However, the highest estimates are lower. IHME forecasts 81,766 deaths. That's down, without mitigation, it was 2.2 million. It's down to 81,000. It's still a lot of suffering. It's still a lot of grief. It's still a lot of farewells. With a projected, with a range between 49,431 on the low side and 136,401 on the high side. That is significantly lower than the 100 to 240,000 we saw on Thursday and Friday of last week. The estimated peak day for the country is April 16th. They expect 3,130 deaths on that day. Meanwhile, there is good news from the Financial Times as Europe prepares to ease coronavirus lockdowns. Governments across Europe, I'm reading from the story, have begun preparations to ease the lockdowns imposed across much of the continent. That's France, Spain, Belgium, and Finland are among countries that have set up expert committees to examine a gradual easing of stay-at-home orders. That is great news. Let's hope it continues. What do you think about the new drugs? Here's Stephen Hahn, the FDA commissioner. Not new drugs, it's new use for an old drug. Here's Stephen Hahn, cut number 20 on Fox News with Jesse Waters.
So we're hearing anecdotal reports of benefits, so sort of case by case. But what we really need to make the best decision for the American people by the FDA is really a controlled trial so that we understand its true effect, both on the safety side as well as on the effectiveness side.
And when do you think a trial like that will be finished?
It will take probably months for that trial to be finished for us
All
to
right,
get that
stop right
information.
there. So what the president was saying last night, we do not have the trials that we normally use to approve a new drug for a new use. We don't have them. What we have is a pandemic. And therefore, some doctors see some efficacy in this drug. And he is broadcasting that anecdotal evidence for doctors to consider as they consult with their patients. What would you do? My toxicologist said, of course he would take it. And he would take it with erythromycin because he doesn't have a heart problem. There are lots of other drugs out there, including some of those that come from the AIDS epidemic, pandemic treatment. And there are other things all over the world. The key is don't get your shorts and don't get your knickers boxed up here. You don't have to worry about anything. It's up to the doctor and the patient. But compassionate use, the right to try, now more than ever, and now more than ever, hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show is coming up. Don't miss it. Go over to YouTube if you missed Walker, and we'll post it soon if you subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening this morning. Hour number 3 is now underway, and I'm pleased to report the best news of the morning comes from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington School of Medicine, grading the need for ICU beds, the number of ventilators, the expected death toll. The United States is doing its job. Joining me to discuss that, United States Senator Marsha Blackburn from the great state of Tennessee. Senator, good morning. Great to have you on the program.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
Last week we added 92.9 up in the Tri-City area, including Bristol and Johnson City, and we're glad to have more Tennesseans listening.
Well, indeed we are, and I think right now what we're seeing, Hugh, is so many people are looking for actual information, things that are factual. They're tired of a lot of the opinion that is being given by many, many newscasters. And so what they're saying is, give me the facts.
The facts, as reported by IHME today, is the death forecast is still very high, 81,766, with a range of between 49,000 and 136,000. That is down significantly from their range of last week, Senator Blackburn, which was 100 to 240,000. If we keep depressing the curve, that number will continue to fall.
That is exactly right, and it is a matter of the individuals continuing to follow the CDC guidance, wash their hands, practice their social distancing, make certain that when they go out, they are covering their face. I wear a mask and I wear gloves every time I go out. And I think those are important things for people to do.
Now, Senator, talk to me a little bit about Phase 4. I wrote a column about Leader McConnell for the Washington Post this weekend. I think you are blessed to have in the country as one of the greatest leaders the Senate has ever seen. But Nancy Pelosi wants a Phase 4. The leader said last week on this show he wants to see how Phase 3 works. What does Marsha Blackburn think?
One of the things that we are beginning to talk about for the next round of activity, and some of my colleagues in the Senate and I are working on this, is to say, okay, how do we, number one, craft an exit strategy from this? And number two, how do we have something that is basically a kick the hell out of China approach? And that involves bringing our pharmaceutical manufacturing back. And, of course, I have my legislation that would incentivize bringing that back. And that legislation's been around for a while. And Senator Menendez is the lead Democrat sponsor on that. Also, looking at expanding broadband into rural areas so we can bring other types of manufacturing and technological manufacturing back and utilize those technologies. And I think you're going to see us do this. I told one of my colleagues last week we should call this the Mama Act, Make America Manufacture Again, and bring these jobs back to U.S. shores, because we've become so dependent on China in different supply chains, whether you're looking at the pharmaceutical component or you're looking at automobile aftermarket auto parts or automobile manufacturing parts, or if you're looking at different components for technology, high tech, there's a certain battery component that is used in amplification equipment. The single source for that is now China. So there is a variety of things where we have outsourced this. And you look, we all know it, China steals our intellectual property. They go in and they reverse engineer our products. They have lied, they've cheated, they've been stealing from us for decades. So now is the time to say, okay, we're never going to put ourselves in this situation again where we are completely dependent on a country for an item, like our antibiotics.
Now, Senator, I agree with you 100%. I think you and Tom Cotton, Mike Gallagher, Senator Menendez bring pharmaceuticals home. But I must say, in the $2.2 trillion Phase 3, there was almost nothing for the Department of Defense. And China is our strategic adversary. And if there is a phase 4, I think the Republicans will have failed unless it forward appropriates critical infrastructure for our triad and other weapon systems that deter China.
And as we look at the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, we are taking in so many of these considerations. And Senator Inhofe is leading a lot of that work, Hugh. And as we continue to work through that process for this year, you're going to see much of that embodied in that legislation as we look at them. A couple of years ago, I said I felt like the new axis of evil was North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. And I had someone remind me of that comment recently, because you look at the alliances that are there, you look at the way China withholding this information has hurt us. And they knew they had this. I was talking to some activists last week. They knew for 51 days they had an outbreak on their hands, but they didn't want to mess up the Chinese New Year and the festivities with the Communist Party leadership coming to Wuhan for part of that celebration. So
I agree. But, Senator, if I want to go back to something. I trust Senator Inhofe on the NDAA completely, but if there is a phase 4, there has got to be forward appropriation for strategic systems. There wasn't anything in the $2.2 trillion for example, Columbia-class submarines or B-21 bombers. I am shocked, actually. I'm told it was OMB's unilateral decision to tell the Senate we didn't want anything. But you have to lead the gang in making sure that the forward appropriation of these strategic systems that face down China, because we can have all the pharmaceutical manufacturing in the world, but if we don't deter the People's Liberation Army Navy at sea, it ain't going to help us much.
Well, and you're right about that. And that is never far from my mind, the fact that we have to stay on top of that as a big part of our game. And you're exactly right on that. I think that it is vitally important that we look at this. You know, we've talked about a whole of government approach.
Yes.
As we look at an exit strategy and as we look at a way forward, you're exactly right, Hugh, because the $2.2 trillion, and that was really a rescue package. And that was a way to soft land the economy, because the federal government was saying to businesses, you have to shut your doors. And that was health, food, and financial rescue. Now it is time for us to move to recovery. And in that recovery and in that way forward, we have to take into account what is going to happen with our defense systems and looking at the bad actions and looking at China's desire. Their goal is complete domination, and we have to realize that. And
now I want to close, Senator, on a high note. I think Dolly Parton is a constituent of yours, is she not?
Indeed she is.
She has been the most remarkable purveyor of good humor, goodwill, and good acts. I don't know if she's already got the American Medal of Freedom, but she needs one because she's amazing. I just get sent to me by people all over the country. This is what Dolly Parton did today. I had no idea she was this public-minded.
She has always been public-minded. Dolly is very dear. And when you look at what she did for Upper East Tennessee, up in Sevier County, where she grew up there in East Tennessee, it is amazing. The establishment of Dollywood, the jobs that has brought, the way she has worked with education and giving every child who is born in this state, they get a book a month for the first year of their life. And Dolly has done that for years. She's probably done that for 20 years. And just to be sure these children have books and have the ability to read regardless of where they live and what their income level is.
Well, your colleague Lamar Alexander told me Alex Haley's tomb has on it, find the good and praise it. Well, let's find Dolly Parton and praise her because she deserves it.
I totally agree with you. Yes, she does.
Senator Marsha Blackburn, keep coming back from the volunteer state. Thank you, Senator. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show, except perhaps over to YouTube. I'm pushing this hard so that you get all these interviews and you can watch them as well. YouTube.com, then just type in Hugh Hewitt with a space and subscribe. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. So many Americans want to get back to work at 9 to 5 or 8 to 7 or whatever they do. Dolly Parton has just been a hero in Tennessee and the country. I've just been sent so many people know I'm heard across the country, and they want me to draw attention to her, and I'm glad to have done so. I also want to draw attention to an issue about Phase 4. Chinese manufacturing is deeply integrated in the American supply chain. And Phase 3 may inadvertently be assisting China, which unleashed this on the world. Not China, the people, or the country, but the Communist Chinese Party, the CCP. They did this to everybody. And right now, whether you're North American Stainless, which is a stainless steel producer that has 1,500 people in Carrollton, Kentucky, that's being undercut by China, or your airplane maintenance workers, and you're being undercut by China. There are a lot of supply chains that need help, but we cannot be sending American taxpayer dollars to China. And so Phase 4 is going to have to look very hard at every manufacturing supply chain line. Until and unless, at a minimum, China owns it. At a minimum, they step up and say, our fault. And stop trying to, their propaganda is remarkable. They have set up thousands of troll factories and troll accounts trying to blame Trump, you, me, everybody in the world for this. And they are not getting pushback from American media because American media, a lot of it, not all of it, has got Trump derangement syndrome. And all they care about is making Trump look bad, and they are giving the People's Republic of China's CCP a pass. That is unacceptable. President Trump, speaking of whom, has just tweeted. Four tweets, in fact. 32 minutes ago, the president wrote, for humanitarian reasons, the passengers from the two coronavirus-stricken cruise ships have been given medical treatment and, when appropriate, allowed to disembark under strict supervision. Very carefully done. People were dying. No other countries would allow them to dock. 29 minutes ago, the president tweeted, thank you, Gail Trotter. I only wish the public could fully understand how corrupt and dishonest so much of our lamestream media is. My press conferences are vital. They are reaching millions of people that are not being told the truth and haven't been for years. Witch hunts, fake news. By the way, I believe that every network ought to carry every press conference end to end. It's my appeal to my friends across the spectrum at every network they do that. 27 minutes ago, the president tweeted USA Strong. 27 minutes ago, all in caps, light at the end of the tunnel. I believe he's referring to the new IHME COVID study that says all of the projections were too high. That's great news. We are seeing that reflected in the market, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, together they are AndrewandTodd.com. All you need to know is that if you need a refinance, they are closing refinances. If you need to buy a house, they are getting your appraisal and they are getting your mortgages done. If you need to get a reverse mortgage and you're a senior citizen, you can trust AndrewandTodd.com. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are not brokers. You can call them at 888-888-1172. You may not want to lock yet. The 10-year, is still below water at 0.59%. I don't know what the mortgage markets are at, but you can trust them. Overseas, Japan was up 4.25% overnight. Even though Japan is looking at 90 to 180-day lockdown, they see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hong Kong is up 2%. Open right now, England and Germany up 2% and 4% respectively. I expect American markets will have an extraordinary day today, even though they were down over the week, over on Friday. I just think that report, which I just referenced, from the Institute for Health Metrics, is really going to rocket around the world as the good news we've been waiting for. Stay separate, stay distanced, but stay optimistic, America. We will meet again, as the Queen said yesterday, and you can meet with AndrewandTodd.com virtually, answer a couple of questions online, or call them at 888-888-1172. Senator Rob Portman is next. Stay tuned.
Hey, yours.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Joined now by my home state Senator Rob Portman. Senator Portman, welcome back. Always good to speak with you.
Hugh, always great to be on with you, and we look forward to seeing you back in Ohio when this thing clears up.
And now let's talk about your role as a member of the Senate Finance Committee, because that means you've got tariffs under your under your venue, under your purview. And you've done some great work with U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer, I should say a native of Ashtabula, Ohio, and therefore very smart.
Another Ohioan.
Brother, another Buckeye, and near where I spent my summers in Saybrook. But you had to go to him and get some tariff relief for hand sanitizer. That's going to lead me into general talk about tariff. Tell us about the specifics of that first.
Well, as you know, we have tariffs in place against China still. Some were removed during phase one, and some were not put in place that would have. But there's still tariffs in place for a lot of products, including a 25% tariff for two items that the hand sanitizer company, Purell, was using. So they've got one product that goes into their little hand dispenser, the one you'd have at your home, and another one that would go into a dispenser that you'd find, say, at an airport. And so they were paying an additional 25%. This means that gets passed along to the consumer, and the prices were higher for Purell. It also, they said, had some impact on the supply. In other words, that they were having more difficulty getting it because of the 25% tariff. So we went to U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer. He understood immediately that this is a product that is part of responding to the coronavirus issue. So we worked through what's called an exclusion, basically a waiver of that 25%. And, the idea is eventually, as you well know, Hugh, to bring this kind of production to America. But in the meantime, the Chinese have the patent on this particular part of this dispenser. And so we wanted to be sure that wasn't going to make it harder for us to respond to coronavirus. And Purell is a great Ohio company. They're running 3 shifts right now. They're just going
of
full
course,
bore trying to produce more hand sanitizer.
So that's good. Did Lighthizer get that lifted then? That's successfully done?
Yes.
Right.
That was done yesterday. And so, that will help to have the cost a little bit lower for folks who can go to the store and get it. I would tell you, it's tough to get it at stores in Ohio because it's so badly needed. And one thing we're finding back here, Hugh, is that there are some businesses that are deemed essential. And God love them. They're in there working hard. They're using social distance. They're using masks in some cases. But they've also got to use hand sanitizer. And some of these businesses have contacted me and said, hey, Rob, I want to stay open, but I got to have more hand sanitizer. So the Purell news is good. Also, the Procter & Gamble company in Cincinnati, Ohio, is now making hand sanitizer in some of their facilities, including, as I understand it, a perfume factory that's been converted to hand sanitizers. And they're providing 55-gallon drums of this, to FEMA to be able to get out to companies and to healthcare providers. To the frontline healthcare workers and others. So there's a lot of innovation going on right now in Ohio. You'd be proud of our Ohio citizens and our Ohio companies stepping up.
Oh, my gosh. Battelle learning how to disinfect face masks. I mean, there's a lot that the Buckeye State's responsible for. Let me talk to you about our steel industry because I'm from the Steel Valley. And stainless steel is under assault from China. They're actually manipulating the tariff system from within. Are you aware of this problem, and is Ambassador Lighthizer, and are you working to get China out of our production system and yet protect stainless steel? I'm not a tariff guy. I'm a free trader, but they are just predators.
Yeah, and this is where I come down to, as you know, you and I have talked about this before. The idea of trade is a good one. If a country makes it less expensively than you do, and good for consumers and everybody. The problem is, China has not been playing by the rules. They've been cheating on trade. And so whether it's stainless or what they were doing with flat rolled steel, which is the stuff you use for everything from, refrigerators to washing machines to automobiles, they were selling it at below their cost, dumping it. And so I did write legislation called Level the Playing Field Act, and it actually increased the ability to enforce our laws. And so now we have a 269% tariff, as an example, on some of the flat rolled steel from China because they were not playing by the rules. And same with stainless. So, trade's got to be fair and free. And so we need to stand up for our industries. This is particularly true with regard to some of these products that are essential to our national security. I'd put steel up there as one of those because
stainless steel is to the medical industry as everything. And China has entered into this joint venture with ATI, and I just believe that they are masters at this. I look at the aviation industry repair business as well. Are we writing rules? Are you working with Treasury to make sure that the relief that was passed in Phase 3 are going to go to actual American workers who are working on American airplanes as opposed to foreign subsidiaries getting taxpayer dollars?
Well, it's a good question, and that topic did come up when we talked about the the funds that were needed to keep the airlines operating, and also the Boeing money and the other manufacturers who are on the supply chain. My answer is we've got an inspector general, as you know. The president just named one for all of this, and a lot of that focus is on the Exchange Stabilization Fund and, in particular, the funding that's going to our national security company. So you've inspired me, Hugh. I'm going to look into it even more closely with regard to that specific issue, but that's the idea, is that this money ought to be going for American companies and American citizens.
Now, Leader McConnell was on last week. He was skeptical of a rapid move to phase 4. I am skeptical that if the Republican caucus in the Senate doesn't have its ideas on the table, we'll get rolled by Speaker Pelosi and a press which is just out of control at this point. I just don't think they're neutral at all. Do you think that we have to at least put some ideas on the table about what phase 4, by we I mean center-right conservatives, what phase 4 ought to consist of?
Yes. I'm concerned that Speaker Pelosi has said publicly and is working privately on phase 4 legislation already. And as you know, the person who has the pen tends to have an advantage. Back in the days when you negotiated, you probably still do some of this in your legal practice, you want to have the pen. And so we've got to be sure that we have our own ideas on the table. I do think that Speaker Pelosi is responding to pressure she's getting from her membership because, as you know, phase 3 was largely a Senate product. But the fact is, we've got to be sure we aren't wasting money. I mean, we still have the debt deficit. I know interest rates are very low, and that's good right now to fund it. But we've got to be sure that we're spending money properly. And I think phase 4 right now ought to be worked on. We don't know exactly what's going to be in it, though. Let's let phase 3 first be implemented and see where the gaps are, because I think that's one thing we're going to have to do is look at, what worked, what didn't work. Fine-tuning might be the minimum we'll have to do. We might have to change some things substantially if, as an example, as you say, some money's going to the wrong places. But then second, by the time we get to phase 4, Hugh, I'm hoping that we have the economy able to start to make a comeback. In other words, that there will be better information as to how many new infections there are every day, how many hospitalizations, maybe some work on this antibody medication, so that we have the ability to test people for antibodies and to see how we can get the economy moving again. If that's true, then it ought to be focused on real stimulus. And that means
I agree.
Filling the gaps, but also getting this economy moving again, because it's in free fall right now.
I just talked to your colleague, Senator Blackburn, about the fact that $2.2 trillion and barely a whisper for defense. I don't think we can do that again because our strategic adversary is China. But let me talk to you about something Speaker Pelosi has brought up, which is filling up the coffers of the public employee pension funds that have been devastated. Now, I understand there's a problem, but I also understand if that happens, there has to be some reform. One of those things, I don't believe a single public employee in the United States should make more than a colonel who has put in 25 years in the United States military, whether in the Marines or the Army or a captain in the Navy. I just think there's got to be a limit on this. If we're going to save state pension funds devastated by the market collapse, are you prepared to demand that they give us some reform?
Yes, and we're working on that also with regard to the multi-employer pension funding. The Democrats wanted to put that in at the last minute. I was for doing it, but only if there were reforms, because otherwise we're right back into the soup again. I mean, we're going to end up having ourselves bail out again and again unless we put reforms in place that are responsible. And on the public employee pension funds, there are some states that have done a good job. I would point to your home state of Ohio as an example with OPERS, where they've been more conservative about their projections, the so-called discount rate, where you assume kind of what the interest rate's going to be, and you make contributions based on that. So let's not discourage those who've done the right thing and encourage those who have done the wrong thing in terms of employee pensions.
Now, Senator, I want to put one more idea in your head. I've talked about it with a couple of your colleagues. There are trillions of dollars in retirement savings and tax advantaged accounts. If we allow people to use their own money, say at a 10% flat tax, they will be the most efficient stewards of their funds, more than the government. If you say, okay, you'll pay us a 10% flat tax if you take money out of a tax-advantaged account, they will use it where they need it, and the government need not get involved. What do you think?
Well, I think generally a good idea. With regard to this particular crisis, we just passed legislation in phase 3 that allowed people to get out from under the 10% penalty if they need to access their 401k, as an example, to get through this crisis. And I'm all for savings, as you know. I think we're under saving still in this country. We need to do more in private retirement. But at a time like this, I think that is one of the most efficient ways to get the funding where it ought to go. Second, this issue of the minimum distribution you've got to make out of your retirement when you reach a certain age, 70 and a half, you got to start taking the money out and paying taxes on it. That required minimum distribution, we also postponed for this year. That's really important because otherwise folks are having to pull money out and pay taxes on it, and they have to pull it out at the value as of 12/31/19, so the end of last year, when the market was doing a whole lot better. So they're going to be paying taxes on value that's not there.
Those were both great things, but I also think a lot of Americans don't want to touch that money because they're going to bring it out at 28 or 15%, but they're going to have to. And if you have to go get your retirement money to keep your restaurant alive, I don't think we ought to tax you at 28% because of the condition. I think a 10% flat tax would bring money in, but also not crush people because it really is. Nobody wants to get that money out, right? It's tax advantage, but some people need to get it.
Right. Well, Hugh, I think that's something we ought to look at in phase 4. So not only not having a penalty, but if it's your money and it's in a tax advantage account of some kind, and there are a number of them, including education, healthcare, retirement, then there would be a flat tax attached to it. Well, that may be helpful.
Senator, are you working from Ohio via conference call, or are you working from D.C. via small meetings?
I got in my pickup truck and drove back to Ohio as soon as I could, and I'm here working in Ohio today. I've got a live Facebook town hall. I've got 2 or 3 other videos that I'm doing, and then I've got 5 TV interviews with local, TV here in Ohio to get the word out as to how people can take advantage of the new SBA program. What's happening in terms of the overall coronavirus issue here in Ohio, and so we're just trying to stay in touch with people as best we can to help them. And then second, I'm doing a lot with Ohio companies, as you indicated, whether it's Purell or Battelle or Cardinal Health or Procter & Gamble. We've got so many companies in Ohio that want to get engaged and involved and help more, and I'm trying to knock down some of the federal barriers for them to do that, and have been pretty successful in helping there. There are 3 innovative manufacturers, as an example, right now who want to help on ventilators. And these are small manufacturers who have a lot of expertise in manufacturing. They brought in medical experts to help them on the ventilators. They want to help. They're not looking to make money, but they are looking to help, and that's exciting too. So I'm trying to be helpful.
Senator Rob Portman, keep up the good fight. Send Rob Portman on Twitter. He's doing the right thing. I'll be right back. Don't forget, ReliefFactor.com during the break. I'll tell you about it on the other side as well. Go to ReliefFactor.com. Get your package. Welcome back, America. Right after the broadcast this morning, I'll be hitting the trails to get my, I think, 6 today. Did 10 on Saturday, thanks to ReliefFactor.com. I recommend all of you support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. Get your starter pack, $19.95, ReliefFactor.com. And don't forget HonorBoundCoffee.com. 100% of the profits of every cup of coffee you drink go to support military families if you subscribe to HonorBoundCoffee.com. I'm joined now by Tim Alberta. Tim, of course, with Politico Magazine. He is also a native of that state up north, which is really under heavy weather. Since I talked to you last week, Tim, everybody in Team Alberta still feeling okay?
Yeah, still feeling okay. So far, so good. How about you and your family?
Yes, thank you for asking. So what do you think is going on in Detroit? Why is Detroit so badly buffeted?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a combination of factors. Hugh, obviously, you've got parts of the city of Detroit that are extremely poor and a lot of people with little access to health care on a regular basis. And you also have neighborhoods that are sort of built on top of one another where there's just an extremely dense population and physically, and so that's contributing. You also have an enormous international border crossing in Michigan, and I was actually just looking at some information the other night about direct flights from China. Detroit has tons of direct flights coming in from China, far more than you would expect.
I had no idea.
Because, yeah. So I think it's a combination of things, but ultimately, Detroit, even more than Texas thus far, is just getting hammered with this thing, and there's really no sign of let up at the moment. It's a pretty bleak situation.
Now, nationally, Dr. Christopher Murray, who's the director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME, has released a very optimistic report this morning. It still has 83,000 Americans dying, but it's down significantly from the model last week and the model 2 weeks ago as Americans adopt mitigation. I'm not sure Detroit, though, is included in one of the optimistic scenarios. It doesn't seem like it can organize, and I think you're getting at it. I think it's the decay in basic social services that has occurred over a generation.
Yeah. That's the thing is you'll see some rosier forecasts and you'll see some not so rosy forecasts. And I have yet to see, and I've been tracking this pretty closely, I have yet to see any of the rosy forecasts touching on Detroit. It's just a bad situation. I'm on my way up to Lansing at the moment, which is probably why you can hear the background noise in the car. But Governor Whitmer is holding a press conference this morning. I'm on my way up there to go to that press conference. And, I've been talking over the last few days with Republican leaders in the state, Democratic leaders in the state, and it's just there's a real undertone of discouragement. I'm not sure if you know this, Hugh, but a state representative died here recently.
Yes, in Detroit. Young man.
Very young man, very, very popular guy who was kind of a real fighter for the city, and then another state rep came down with coronavirus. He appears to be doing okay, but it's just as much as anywhere outside of New York, it's just a very bleak situation here at the moment, and with no real sign of immediate improvement.
I cannot imagine my beloved Law Quad empty, but I am sure it is. I can't imagine Ann Arbor empty, but I imagine it is shut down. Are you going to stop on your way back and see what Ann Arbor, which is the beating heart of Michigan? I know Detroit is historically, but Ann Arbor is these days. It's beating heart. Are you going to stop and take a look around at the ghost town that I expect Ann Arbor is?
I drove through it the other day, and it's eerie. I know that's a word we're hearing a lot these days, and it's the only one that comes to mind. It's seeing that entire campus area and downtown, which is, you're right, it's sort of the cultural backbone of the state. To see it just completely hollowed out, it's very strange, and hopefully it doesn't last much longer, but again, we're not seeing any signs yet that give us much hope.
You've got editors to give you ideas, but Tim, I'm worried about my alma mater, University of Michigan Law School. They have graduates that they usually get 95% employment. I would bet that a lot of the offers that have been extended to these lawyers have been withdrawn. I would bet it's like the collapse of 2008 in the legal market. I don't know that for a fact. I just think it will be that destructive. And I also believe a lot of the local press is going to be engulfed. Have you seen that yet?
We're starting to see it. We're, the Plain Dealer, I'm sure you saw, Hugh, just announced another hatchet job. You've got over the last couple of years here, obviously, a lot of these newsrooms just having a cleaver taken to them. And my expectation is that, look, for a lot of people, Hugh, that's real disposable income. If you're going to be contributing to a local public radio or paying for a subscription to a local Metro Daily. And sadly, my hunch is that for some folks, that's where they might look to cut back, even at a time when, good reporting, accurate reporting is at such a premium.
No, any advertising-based business is in trouble. I hope that the Congress steps forward and makes sure that the Treasury counts the Fourth Estate as part of the essential infrastructure of America. Tim Alberta, follow him on Twitter and at Politico Magazine. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'll be back tomorrow with the next Hugh Hewitt Show.